Hey everybody, so in this video we're going to build a full stack chat application using Python and JavaScript. More specifically, we'll be using Fast API on the back end and React.js on the front end. The good news is that this is without a doubt the nicest looking chat app on YouTube for Python. So let me show you how it looks. To start, you get brought to this authentication page where you can specify any username and then get authenticated and brought into the app. And if this user already exists, you can see their existing chat histories gets pulled up, or you can spin up new chats with your friends. So I'll create a new group chat between my buddies Zach and Eric. And this is real-time chat, meaning that if I send a new message within this chat here, and I go in and log in as one of those other users, like Eric, not only can you see that existing message history, but if I write a new message like this here, you can see that immediately appears for Adam back in his tab. So it is real-time chat. Not only that, there's a whole lot more that we'll be building. So if I compress this app here, you can see that the UI supports both desktop and mobile. You can also see read receipts whenever I send a new message like this right here. Watch it pop up. Cool. And you can even attach image and files within your messages. So I'll attach this cool YouTube thumbnail and you can see that appear in both tabs too. So it's a very feature-rich application. It's also a very scalable application. This architecture is able to support up to a couple thousand users at once, even hundreds of thousands of users, depending on how you build it. And I'm going to be giving you a lot of the code out of the box so that you're going to be able to save some time here. I think altogether this video should take, 10, 20 minutes to complete. So you can either download the code right away and toy around with it in a few minutes, or you can follow along and learn how we'll be using Chat Engine, their WebSockets, their web components to build this app extremely quickly and easily. So without further ado, let's start building this Python and React chat app. So in the first step, we're going to download a lot of the JavaScript front-end code. Because this is a Python tutorial, we'll download it, I'll show you briefly how it works, and then we'll just run the front-end project and focus on most of the coding in the Python server side of this application. To follow along, you can find this blog post here. It's the first link in the description of this video, and it's going to have a lot of the code that we'll want to copy and paste just to make sure that there are no mistakes. So again, in the first step, we're going to download or write the JavaScript front end and run it on this local host right here. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is stand up a project or a folder that will actually be running our code inside. So we'll make a directory in wherever your computer you want. In my case, desktop. So I'll cd into desktop. I'll run make directory Python JavaScript chat. I'll cd into Python JavaScript chat. And then I'll run code space dot to open this up in VS Code. If you don't have that extension, you can also just do file, open folder, and then select the folder that you want to work on. Great. So right now we have an empty directory, but we want to get all that front-end code inside of our project. That's really easy to do. All we have to do is run a git clone on this repository here and then call it front-end by spaces. So what we can do is open up a new terminal, expand this window. Will bring me some space up here, clear it out. And again, we're just going to run git clone this repository link and we'll call it front end. And we're done. So you can see now within our folder, we have this little front end project here that's full of some JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And we should cd into that project now. So cd front end. Now we're in our front end. To run this JavaScript project, all we really need to do is npm install to install all the dependencies with Node Package Manager. And once that completes, we can run npm run dev. npm run dev. And we're done. We have a simple React app running on localhost 5173. So I'll take a few minutes right now just to explain the code. But again, the meat and potatoes of this tutorial is really going to be the Python part. So let's just open up how it looks. Out of the box, you get that pretty authentication UI, and you can specify any username you want, and it will bring you to the chats page. But right now, we're not authenticating any users and we're not loading any chats because our Python server doesn't exist. So that's exactly what we're going to do in the next part of this application. So now that we have this basic UI set up, but we need a server, let's go into part 2 of this article here. So it's really simple. What we're going to do is create a backend folder next to our front end folder, enter it, and then we'll spin up a fast API server within a main.py file and run that alongside our front end. So let's do exactly that. I'm going to open up a new terminal and keep the front end app running. And I'll cd into backend after I create that directory. So make dir backend. You can see it's next to front end here, and we'll cd into it. Cool. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to spin up a virtual environment. So when we install all these dependencies, we have somewhere to put them. So run python 3-m venv venv. And that's going to spin up a virtual environment called venv. Looks like that's up and running now, as we can see right here. So next what we want to do is run source venv bin activate. And that's going to spin up the virtual environment, as you can see on the left side of our terminal. Next, what we want to do is install a bunch of dependencies and put them inside the virtual environment. Now you can easily do that by installing FastAPI, Unicorn, and requests. So again, FastAPI is the web framework we'll be using. Unicorn actually allows you to run that server properly. And then requests is a dependency that we'll be using for our chat engine APIs. And we'll also be upgrading pip before we do all of these installs. So I'd copy these 3 commands to save some time, paste them all in. And then the last thing that we're doing is we're also running pip freeze to list out all the dependencies, and we're saving them in a requirements.txt file. So this should take a second to complete. And once that's done, you can see in backend now that we have venv and we have requirements.txt that holds all the dependencies that we just installed. Great. Last thing we need to do, as mentioned before, is create a main.py file. Now this main.py file is going to host all the server code that we need to make this chat app work. Now we have some boilerplate Python code, which I'll copy and paste and then explain, and we'll be adding to this code later on. So of course, we need to import FastAPI, and we need to import the CORS middleware so that we can call this server from any other website. In this case, we'll be calling it from localhost 5173. That's why we need all these settings. Then what we're doing is we're creating a basic post method for localhost 3001/authenticate, and we'll be pasting in user data in the request body. In this case, just a username string. And for now, we're just returning an empty JSON object. So this server still isn't doing that much. But let's run it now. In the article over here, you can see we have this command, which will allow us to run this app. So unicorn main app, and that's this right here. And then reload whenever we change the file, and we'll run it on port 3001. And there we go. We now have our Python server running on port 3001. Now, this is probably going to have a few, it's going to be hard to test. So what I'm going to try, just to show that it works, is remove authenticate, make it just a GET request, and I'm going to take out the user body. And if I go to localhost 3001 as just a GET request, you can see it's returning that empty JSON object. And if I said like this, that, and I refresh, you can see that it returned the request body as promised. So we have a Python server up and running, but this clearly isn't authenticating users, nor is it actually granting people any sort of chat functionality. And in the last part of this tutorial, we'll do exactly that. In the last section of this video, we're going to connect our front end to our back end and our back end to chat engine using REST APIs. So for those who don't know, chatengine.io, it gives you chat infrastructure that your app can access and leverage, as it says right here. What that means is that on your back end, you can register users to chat engine via REST APIs and give your users access to their chat infrastructure. And then on the front end, you can use Chat Engine's WebSockets and NPM components to essentially give your app feature-rich scalable chat right out of the box. So it sounds complicated, but it's really not. Let me show you how this works in this project. So to start, you want to go to chatengine.io, sign up, and then create a free project. Once you create a free project, you get a project ID and a private key. The project ID is like your API key. It allows you to associate API calls with your project. The private key gives you access to create and destroy users within this project. So I'm going to copy the private key right now. As you can see, I have a few users within my project, but what we'll do is we'll set up an authenticate method on FastAPI, and when I create a new user within the web UI, you'll see him pop up right here. Let's do that right now. So I'm going to paste my private key down here, and I'm going to take some of the code changes that were within that blog article and paste them in. So you can see that we're going to import requests. We're going to use requests to make a put call to this endpoint, and we're going to pass in a username, a secret, and a first name, and have the header as the private key. So let's do all this right now. So if we make it a post method to authenticate again, we import requests. I actually see a small issue within this code snippet. This should be private key. Private dash key is equal to private key, and then we should declare that variable, which is the private key, which we pasted down here. And this should work. So again, what we did is within this authenticate method, we basically take the user variable, which is just their username, and we set the username, the secret, and their first name to just that username variable. And then we give ourselves permission to do this by specifying the private key for this project, and we return the response as JSON. Now, this app is running again, so if we go back to this V project, and we'll make up a new name like Homer, and I press enter, Homer now has access to this app, and if you go to the users page, you should see Homer pop up here. So there's a slight issue in the article too, and I'll have them correct it. Basically, this me suffix should be taken away. So now, if we go into the website and we refresh, and I'll set up another one, Homer2, enter, not only should that get created, but if we go into Chat Engine, you should see Homer2 just got spun up right there. So now our Python server is making API calls to Chat Engine and making a get or create user call, essentially logging them in or signing them up, depending on if they're new or not. And last but not least, in the React app, we just need to link an environment variable so that when the chats page loads, not only do we pull up that user's username and their secret, but we associate it with the correct project ID. So within front-end source chats page, I would copy this variable, the v chat engine project ID, and in the front-end level, create a new file called .env.local. And we need to assign this value. And if you go to your Chat Engine project, project settings, project ID, you can link that environment variable, and we should rerun the front end. So you can see it right there, running on localhost 5173. And if we do Homer, Homer gets authenticated, and he can now chat with Adam, Eric, whoever, and start sending messages. And we're fully good to go. We're now in a situation where users can sign up or authenticate within our auth page. Once that's done, get loaded into our chats page and start chatting with all of those other lovely users within your application. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to make this as easy as possible for all of you. Thank you for watching.